The world didn't end with a bang, but with the sickening clatter of a silver platter on stone. My clumsy fall sent me sprawling onto the one place I was forbidden to even breathe near, the cursed Alpha's throne. Before the last echo faded, every wolf in the hall was on their feet, and I was staring up from the forbidden seat into the piercing eyes of the man who might just end me right there. Chapter 1. The Forbidden Fall. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack reeked of raw power. It was a heavy, suffocating blend of sizzling venison roasting over open flames, the acrid bite of aged whiskey, and the sharp, underlying musk of dominance that hung in the air like an invisible fog. For me, Naomi, it was the scent of a life I served but could never touch. My role was simple: be unseen, a fleeting shadow weaving through the chaos of the Alpha's grand feast. I kept my head low, my threadbare woolen dress a dull shadow against the vibrant pelts and embroidered cloaks of the wolves who reveled around me. Their laughter boomed like thunderclaps, each one a jolt against the thin veil of my invisibility. Don't be seen, don't be heard, don't exist. The mantra looped in my mind with every careful step on the chilled flagstone floor. My arms burned from the weight of the silver platter, laden with crystal goblets brimming with spiced mulled wine. I threaded through the crush of bodies, a river of heat and raucous noise. A burly beta, his face ruddy from drink, snatched a goblet without a glance, his rough knuckles grazing my skin. The contact was like a shard of ice, brief, dismissive, a stark reminder of my station. I was beneath the grime on his boots, a mere utensil in their world. A sour tang rose in my throat, sharp as vinegar. I forced it down. Resentment was an indulgence I couldn't afford. It bred mistakes, and mistakes invited punishment. I pressed on, my focus narrowing to the task. At the head of the hall loomed the Alpha King, a hulking figure of weathered scars and unyielding command, his dark eyes scanning the room like a predator surveying its territory. Beside him sat the Luna, her smile as polished and cutting as a whetted blade. But it was the third seat that chilled me most, the Alpha's throne. Hewn for a single ancient ebony tree, its surface gleamed with a sinister polish, etched with runes that seemed to pulse in the firelight. It stood empty tonight, as always during feasts, a silent sentinel of legend. An elder's gravelly voice carried from a nearby table, laced with the weight of years. Cursed it is. Only the true Alpha's mate can claim it and walk away breathing. The last fool who tried? Dust by dawn. The surrounding wolves rumbled with dark amusement, the sound vibrating through my chest. The throne absorbed the flickering torchlight, its shadows deep and insatiable. An unwelcome shiver crawled down my spine. Why does it feel like it's watching me? I shook it off. It was just wood, a deadly, ominous hunk of wood. I needed to stay grounded in the now.
A high-born she-wolf, her hair woven with glittering gems, glanced up as I neared her table, her lips twisted into a disdainful curl. Omega, more wine, and this time try not to drip your pathetic clumsiness all over us. The barb landed with effortless malice. My fingers tightened on the platter's edge until my knuckles blanched, but I dipped my head, my tangled auburn hair curtaining the heat rising in my cheeks. "Yes, my lady," I murmured, my voice a faint squeak, perfectly meek. I refilled her goblet with steady hands, even as a tremor quaked through me. Years of practice had honed my skill at vanishing, folding into the background until I was less than air. It was survival, but tonight their contempt pressed heavier, the air thicker, the jeers sharper. It felt like walls closing in, stealing my breath. I just needed to retreat to the kitchens, to the steamy sanctuary where I could hide. So I hurried, too hastily. A warrior mid-bellow at a body tail extended his leg into the aisle. I didn't spot it. My foot snagged, and the world lurched into a nightmarish slow tumble. The platter launched from my grip. Goblets arced through the air like crimson comets, shattering against the stone in a cacophony of tinkling crystal and sloshing wine. The crash was deafening, a metallic ring followed by brittle snaps. But the true horror was the silence that crashed down after, thick and expectant. Every gaze in the hall pinned me, not the pooling wine staining the ancient floor, nor the sparkling shards scattered like fallen stars. No, they stared at me, Naomi, the invisible Omega, who had just shattered the quiet with spectacular failure. In that instant, I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was exposed, vulnerable, my heart pounding like a trapped animal against my ribs. I sprawled on the cold floor, my cheek grinding into the rough stone that smelled of earth and spilled vintage. But it wasn't the impact that froze the room. It was my position. My outstretched hand had brushed the dais' edge, and in my flailing, I'd landed, impossibly, half reclined against the base of the cursed throne itself. From the hearth's gloom, where he lurked like a specter, he emerged. Roarke, the Alpha Heir, the pack's shadowed prince. He never joined the head table with his father. He'd preferred the edges, a silent guardian etched with scars. One jagged mark sliced through his right brow, vanishing into his raven hair, a badge from a fight no one whispered about. His features were sharp planes of controlled intensity, a face that could have been carved from granite. But his eyes, they were liquid amber, glowing faintly like embers in twilight, capable of unraveling secrets with a glance. He was striking in the lethal way of a blade, beautiful but promising ruin. I'd heard the tales my whole life, murmured in the servants' quarters. He ended her, you know, the one he was fated for. His control snapped, and she paid the price. It painted him as fractured, a beast in princely guise. I saw the same ruthless spark in him as in his father, just veiled by youth and restraint. I despised him for it, his unchallenged authority, his quiet menace, his everything I lacked. He crossed the floor with fluid, predatory grace, the crowd parting like mist before wind. His stare fixed on me, devoid of warmth or leniency, only a steely resolve. He was verdict and blade in one, and I'd committed the ultimate sin, desecrating the feast and grazing the sacred throne. My breath caught. This was my end, not in obscurity, but as entertainment for the wolves who'd always deemed me worthless. A poetic, brutal curtain call. He halted mere steps away, a looming silhouette eclipsing the flames. His scent washed over me. Cedar smoke, crisp frost, and a feral undercurrent that stirred something primal, urging me to submit. He regarded me impassively, his chiseled face a fortress of neutrality. "Get up," he ordered, not a bellow, but a quiet thunder, slicing the hush with ominous promise. It was the prelude to a tempest, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the storm was barreling straight for me. Chapter 2. Shadows of Servitude. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack pulsed with a life that both dazzled and devoured. Its opulence was a blade, sharp and beautiful, cutting me deeper with every step I took. The air was thick with the scent of roasted venison, sweet mead, and the ever-present tang of dominance that coated my tongue like ash. As Naomi, the Omega servant, I was a ghost in this world of wolves.
meant to glide unseen through the chaos of their grand feast. My patched wool dress, frayed at the hems, marked me as less than the polished furs and silken tunics of the pack's elite. Their voices roared, a cacophony of laughter and boasts that battered the fragile shell I'd built around myself. Don't be seen, don't be heard, don't exist. The words were my shield, my prayer, whispered silently as I balanced a heavy silver tray of steaming bread rolls. My arms ached, the tray's weight digging into my flesh like a silent reprimand. I wove through the throng, dodging broad shoulders and careless elbows. A Gamma warrior, his beard flecked with foam, grabbed a roll without a glance, his fingers brushing mine with a roughness that felt like a brand. I was nothing to him, a tool, a shadow, less than the crumbs he flicked away. Bitterness clawed at my throat, sharp and reckless. I swallowed it, knowing it could make me falter, and faltering meant punishment. In this hall, a misstep was a spectacle, and I'd spent years perfecting the art of being nothing. At the head of the hall, the Alpha King loomed like a storm cloud, his grizzled face etched with the scars of battles won and cruelties inflicted. His eyes, cold as river stones, swept the room with possessive hunger. Beside him, the luna's smile gleamed, a crescent of perfect teeth that hid a venom I'd learned to fear. But my gaze drifted, unbidden, to the empty throne beside them, the Alpha's throne, carved from ancient ebony, its runes glinting like secrets in the torchlight. It was a relic of power. Cursed, the elders said. Only the true Alpha's mate can sit and live. The words echoed from a conversation I'd overheard earlier, an elder's raspy warning, laced with grim amusement. The last who tried burned from within. The throne seemed to hum, its shadows curling toward me like tendrils. I shivered, a cold finger tracing my spine. Why did it feel alive?
I tore my eyes away, focusing on my task. A noble she-wolf, her neck draped in sapphire beads, beckoned me with a lazy flick of her wrist. Omega, more bread, and be quick about it. Your slowness is an insult. Her voice was honey laced with thorns, her companions snickering as I approached. My cheeks burned beneath my curtain of auburn hair, but I nodded, murmuring, "Yes, my lady?" I placed a roll on her plate, my hands steady despite the tremor in my chest. Her friend, a lean male with a cruel smirk, leaned forward. "Careful, girl. You're so clumsy you might trip into something you shouldn't." The table erupted in laughter, the sound a whip against my skin. I bowed my head lower, retreating, but their mockery clung to me like damp cloth. The hall felt smaller with every insult, its walls pressing in, the air heavy with their disdain. I'd spent my life shrinking, folding myself into corners to avoid their notice, but tonight their scorn was a weight I couldn't shake. My heart thudded, a frantic rhythm, urging me to flee to the kitchen's quiet steam. I moved faster, weaving through the crowd, when a new sensation stopped me cold. A pull, subtle but insistent, like a thread tugging at my core. My eyes flicked back to the throne. It stood empty, yet it seemed to watch me, its dark surface drinking the firelight. My breath hitched. Was it the curse calling, or something deeper? I shook my head, chastising myself. It was just a chair, a symbol of power I'd never touch. But the pull lingered, a whisper of something ancient, something meant for me. I gripped the tray tighter, forcing my focus back to the present. The feast was a minefield, and I was one misstep from disaster.
Little did I know, that misstep was closer than I feared, and the throne's shadow was already reaching for me. Chapter 3. The Alpha's Glare. The silence in the great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a living beast, heavy and predatory, pinning me to the cold stone floor where I lay sprawled at the foot of the cursed Alpha throne. My cheek pressed against the rough flagstone, the scent of spilled wine and damp earth filling my lungs. The shattered remnants of crystal goblets glittered around me like broken stars, but it was the weight of 100 pairs of eyes that crushed me. Every wolf in the hall, nobles, warriors, betas, stared, their gazes sharp with scorn and bloodlust. I, Naomi, the invisible Omega, had just committed the ultimate sin, crashing the Alpha King's feast and touching the sacred throne. My heart hammered, a frantic bird trapped in my chest, as I waited for the punishment I knew was coming. From the shadows near the hearth, he moved, Roarke, the Alpha Heir, a figure carved from darkness and menace. His presence sliced through the crowd, who parted like prey before a hunter. His boots echoed on the stone, each step a deliberate promise of judgment. I'd always seen him from a distance, a silent sentinel who shunned the head table, his scarred face a map of battles no one dared speak of. The jagged white line cutting through his right brow gleamed in the torchlight, a stark reminder of his violent past. His amber eyes burned, not with warmth, but with a cold, molten intensity that could strip flesh from bone. He was a storm cloaked in human form, and I was the fool who'd drawn his attention.
"Get up," he commanded, his voice a low growl that rumbled through the silence like distant thunder. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. My limbs trembled as I pushed myself up, my worn dress sticking to my sweat-dampened skin. I kept my eyes on the scuffed toes of my boots, unable to meet that searing gaze. The hall held its breath, the air thick with anticipation, as if the wolves craved the spectacle of my destruction. Before I could steady myself, a new voice cut through the tension, slurred and vicious. "Let me deal with her, Prince Roarke," snarled a beta, his broad frame weaving slightly from too much mead. His face was flushed, a string of spittle clinging to his lip as he shoved forward through the crowd. "A clumsy Omega like her, a disgrace. A quick twist of the neck'll teach her place." He lunged toward me, his meaty hand outstretched, fingers curled like claws. I flinched, a choked gasp escaping my lips, my body bracing for the pain. But the blow never came. Roarke moved faster than thought, a blur of lethal grace. One moment he stood a few feet away. The next, his hand clamped around the beta's wrist with a sickly crack. The beta howled, a high-pitched wail of agony, collapsing to his knees, clutching his shattered arm. He hadn't even glanced at him. His amber eyes remained locked on me, cold and unyielding, yet something flickered beneath that icy mask, something raw, conflicted, like a beast pacing behind bars. The hall gasped, a collective intake of breath, as the prince's intervention hung in the air like a storm about to break. Whispers slithered through the crowd, soft but sharp, like blades drawn in the dark. "He killed her, you know," a voice murmured, barely audible. "His fated mate tore her apart in a rage." The words were a ghost from the past, a story I'd heard in hushed tones in the servants' quarters. Roarke, the broken prince, who loved and lost in blood. I'd always seen him as a monster, a younger shadow of his father's cruelty, caged in silence and scars. But now, standing over the whimpering beta, he was something else, something I couldn't name. Why had he protected me? Why risk his reputation for an Omega who just defiled the pack's sacred seat? His gaze held mine, and for a moment the world narrowed to those amber eyes. They weren't just cold, They were haunted, carrying a weight I couldn't fathom. His scent, cedar smoke, frost, and a wild, untamed edge rolled over me, stirring something deep and unwelcome in my core. I hated him, hated his power, his untouchable aura. Yet in that fleeting second, I saw not just the air, but a man wrestling with demons I couldn't see. Enough, Roarke said, his voice a blade cutting through the murmurs. He released the beta, who scrambled away, and turned his attention back to me. You, he said, the word a low, dangerous promise. You will answer for this. His face was a fortress of control, but his eyes betrayed a turmoil that made my breath catch. Was it anger, pity, or something more dangerous? Something that tied me to him in ways I couldn't yet understand.
The Alpha King rose from his seat, his voice a whip-crack of rage. "Roarke, deal with this filth," he roared. But Roarke didn't move, his gaze still fixed on me, a silent storm brewing. I stood frozen, caught between the king's fury and the heir's unreadable stare, knowing my life hung in the balance of whatever came next. Chapter 4. Throne's Mercy. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a frozen tableau, its air thick with the scent of spilled wine and the electric charge of 100 held breaths. I, Naomi, lay sprawled across the base of the cursed Alpha's throne, my body pressed against its polished ebony surface, its ancient runes warm beneath my trembling fingers. The silence was suffocating, a predator poised to strike. Every wolf in the hall, nobles, warriors, elders, stared, their eyes glinting with a mix of shock and bloodthirsty anticipation. I'd committed the unforgivable, not just disrupting the Alpha King's feast, but defiling the sacred throne said to burn any unworthy soul to ash. My heart thundered, a wild drumbeat against my ribs, as I braced for the death I was certain would come. Roarke, the Alpha Heir, towered over me, his amber eyes blazing with the intensity that pinned me to the stone as surely as any blade. His scarred face, carved with that jagged white line through his brow, was a mask of cold control, but something flickered in those molten depths, something raw, unreadable. His scent, cedar smoke, crisp frost, and a wild, untamed edge washed over me, stirring a primal instinct to shrink, to submit. The Alpha King's roar still echoed in my ears, demanding my punishment, but Roarke hadn't moved to obey. He stood like a sentinel, his presence a wall between me and the pack's fury. I tried to scramble to my feet, my palms slipping on the slick stone, but my body betrayed me. My legs buckled, and I slumped back, my spine pressing fully against the throne's edge. A collective gasp ripped through the hall, sharp as a blade. The throne, cursed, deadly, reserved for the true Alpha's mate, hadn't harmed me. No fire surged through my veins, no agony tore me apart. The wood beneath me felt not cold or menacing, but strangely warm, humming with an energy that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. My breath caught, my mind reeling. This can't be right. I'm nothing, an omega, a servant. This throne should have killed me. I looked up, my gaze locking with Roarke's. For the first time, his stoic mask shattered. His amber eyes widened, the molten glow swirling with disbelief, shock, and something deeper, something that looked like recognition. His nostrils flared, as if scenting the air for the first time, and his lips parted, no sound escaping. It was as if he saw me, truly saw me, not as the invisible Omega, but as something impossible. The whispers of the hall surged, a low hiss of rumor and awe. "She sits unharmed," an elder rasped, his voice trembling. Another voice, sharp with disbelief, murmured, "Only the true mate survives." My chest tightened, the weight of their words crashing over me. True mate? Me? The idea was absurd, a cosmic jest. I was Naomi, the girl who scrubbed pots, who ducked insults, who lived in the shadows.
Yet the throne's warmth beneath me felt like a silent affirmation, a secret it refused to share. Rourke's gaze held mine, and in that moment, something shifted. A thread, invisible but undeniable, tugged at my core. It wasn't just fear or shame anymore. It was a pull, a connection that made my skin prickle and my pulse race. I hated him, his power, his scars, the stories of his bloody past. But those eyes, they held a storm I couldn't name, a torment that mirrored my own. The Alpha King's voice shattered the moment, a bellow of rage that shook the rafters. "This is a trick, a mockery!" He surged from his seat, his face purple with fury, his fist slamming the table. "She's a filthy omega, unworthy of breath, let alone the throne." The Luna's smile twisted, her eyes narrowing to slits as she leaned toward her mate, whispering something venomous. The hall buzzed with confusion, the pack torn between superstition and their king's wrath. Roarke took a single step closer, his boots silent on the stone. He said, "Enough," his voice low but slicing through the chaos like a blade. He didn't look at his father, only at me, his expression a battleground of control and chaos. He said, "She lives." The words heavy with meaning, "The throne has spoken." His tone was a challenge, not just to the king, but to the very laws of the pack. The air crackled. The bond between us, unspoken, impossible, humming like a live wire. I didn't understand it, didn't want it, but it was there, tying me to the scarred prince who stood between me and death. The king's eyes burned with murder, but Rourke's stance was unyielding, his gaze never leaving mine. He declared, "She is my responsibility now," the words a quiet vow that sent a shiver down my spine. Was it protection or possession? Salvation or a new kind of cage? All I knew was that the throne's mercy had spared me, but Rourke's stare promised a fate far more dangerous. Chapter 5. Defiance and Imprisonment. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack thrummed with a tension so thick it clung to my skin like damp mist. I stood trembling at the foot of the cursed Alpha's throne, its ebony surface still warm against my back, a silent witness to the miracle that had spared me. The air reeked of spilled wine, charred meat, and the sharp metallic tang of the pack's collective fury. Every eye in the hall, nobles, warriors, elders, bore into me, Naomi, the Omega who dared touch the sacred seat and lived. My pulse roared in my ears, a frantic rhythm drowning out the whispers of true mate and curse breaker that slithered through the crowd. Roarke, the Alpha Heir, stood before me, his amber eyes locked on mine, a storm of conflict raging behind their molten glow. His scarred face was a fortress, but his earlier words, "She lives, the throne has spoken," hung in the air, a defiance that had silenced even the Alpha King's rage. The king rose from his seat, a mountain of grizzled muscle and barely restrained violence. His dark eyes burned with a hatred that made my knees buckle. He roared, "This is blasphemy! An Omega, a wretched servant, dares defile the throne. Her life is forfeit." The Luna's smile was a blade, her gaze slicing into me as she leaned toward her mate, whispering something venomous. The pack stirred, their bloodlust a palpable heat, ready to see me torn apart for my transgression. I was a ghost no longer, just a target. Rourke's stance didn't waver. He stood between me and the king, his broad shoulders a shield against the storm, his scent, cedar smoke, frost, and a wild, untamed edge rolled over me, stirring something deep and unsettling in my core. It was a pull, a thread tugging at my heart, as if the throne's warmth had awakened something I couldn't name. "No," he said, the single word a low, lethal growl that cut through the king's tirade. The hall gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the room. No one defied the Alpha King. It was unthinkable, a death sentence in itself. The king's face purpled, a vein throbbing at his temple. "What did you say, boy?" he snarled, his hand gripping the hilt of the ceremonial dagger at his belt. Roarke turned to face him, his posture radiating a calm, deadly authority that rivaled his father's. "I said no," he repeated, his voice softer, but no less dangerous. "She is not to be harmed. She is my prisoner." The proclamation landed like a thunderbolt, shattering the pack's expectations. Murmurs erupted, a chaotic buzz of confusion and disbelief. Prisoner? Not dead? The law demanded my execution for touching the throne. To claim me as his own was an act of rebellion, a challenge to the king's absolute rule. I stared at Roarke, my mind reeling. His prisoner? The words were a cage, yet they just spared me from a swift death. Why? His amber eyes flicked to me, unreadable, but that mysterious pull tightened, a silent hum that made my chest ache. It was as if an invisible thread bound us, sparked by the throne's mercy, and it terrified me. I hated him, his power, his scars, the whispered tales of the mate he'd destroyed. But this act, this defiance, felt like something else, something I couldn't grasp. The king's rage was a living thing, his fist slamming the table, making goblets jump. "You dare defy me for this filth?" he bellowed. "She's a stain on our honor." But Rourke's gaze didn't falter. "The throne spared her," he said, his voice steady. "That is a sign we cannot ignore. She is mine to judge." The words carried a weight that felt like a claim that was both protective and possessive. The Luna's eyes narrowed, her smile twisting into something colder, and the pack's murmurs grew louder, a mix of awe and suspicion. Royal guards stepped forward, their faces grim, their hands rough as they seized my arms. "Take her to the dungeons," Roarke ordered, his tone flat but commanding. As they dragged me from the hall, the crowd parted, their stares a mix of pity and curiosity. The king's voice roared behind me, promising retribution, but Rourke's presence lingered, his scent and that inexplicable pull following me into the shadows. The dungeon's iron door winged ahead, a promise of cold and despair, but that thread in my chest pulsed, a mystery that refused to let me go. I was alive, but at lip cost. Rourke's defiance had saved me, but it had also bound me to him, and I feared what that bond might mean. Chapter 6. Agony in the Dark. The dungeon door slammed shut behind me, its iron groan echoing like a death knell in the suffocating darkness. The air was dank, heavy with the stench of mold, rust, and despair, pressing against my skin like a cold, wet shroud. I, Naomi, slumped against the rough stone wall, my threadbare dress offering little protection from the chill seeping into my bones. The Crimson Claw Pack's dungeon was a tomb for the forgotten, and I was now its newest occupant, spared from death, but caged by Rourke's cryptic decree. My wrists ached where the guards' rough hands had gripped me, dragging me from the great hall's firelight into this abyss. The memory of Rourke's amber eyes, fierce, conflicted, and inexplicably tied to me, burned in my mind. But it was the invisible thread in my chest that tormented me most. It started as a faint tug, a whisper of the pull I'd felt when I touched the cursed throne. But now, in the dungeon's isolation, it grew into a searing ache, a clawing void that seemed to rip at my very soul.
My breath came in shallow gasps, each one sharper than the last, as if my heart were being torn from my body. What is this? I clutched my chest, fingers digging into the thin fabric over my sternum, but the pain only deepened, a relentless pulse that echoed Roarke's name. I hated him, his power, his scars, the whispered tales of the mate he'd destroyed. But this agony felt like a punishment for being apart from him, as if the throne's mercy had bound us in a way I couldn't escape. I curled into myself, knees drawn to my chest, trying to breathe through the torment, but it was like drowning in fire. Above, in the world of light and power, Roarke paced the shadowed corridors of the keep, his boots silent on the polished stone. The great hall's chaos lingered in his mind, the Omega's impossible survival on the throne, his father's rage, his own reckless defiance. He'd claimed her, named her his prisoner, but the act had shaken him to his core. Her scent, wild honeysuckle and rain-soaked earth, clung to him, stirring memories he'd buried deep. Alara. The name was a blade, cutting through years of control. His lost love, his fated mate, torn from him in blood and betrayal, her death a wound that never healed. The pack whispered he'd killed her, a lie born of his silence, but the truth was a heavier burden. She died because of him, because of his failure to protect her. Roarke's hand traced the scar above his brow, a jagged reminder of that night. The Omega, Naomi, wasn't Alara. Her auburn hair, her defiant eyes, her fragile strength were nothing like his lost mate's. Yet when she'd touched the throne and lived, something in him had fractured. The bond, that cursed pull, had sparked to life, a faint echo of what he'd felt with Alara. It was impossible, blasphemous. He was broken, unworthy of another mate, yet the thread in his chest tugged, urging him toward the dungeon where he'd sent her. Every step away from her sharpened the ache, a mirror of the pain he'd felt when Alara's life slipped through his fingers. He stopped, fist clenched against the wall, his breath ragged. Why her? Why now?
In the dungeon, I rocked against the stone, the pain cresting like a wave. It wasn't just physical. It was a longing, a need that defied reason. Roarke's face flashed in my mind, his cold command, his haunted gaze. I wanted to scream, to curse him for this torment, but my voice was a weak whimper, swallowed by the dark. The throne had spared me, but at what cost? This bond, this agony, felt like a curse of its own. I pressed my forehead to the wall, the cold stone grounding me as I fought the urge to claw at my chest. I'm nothing, an Oga. This can't be real. But the pull was undeniable, a lifeline to the man who'd saved me and caged me in the same breath. Above, Roarke turned toward the dungeon's entrance, his jaw tight, his resolve wavering. He couldn't go to her, not yet. The pack watched, his father plotted, and the ghosts of his past whispered warnings. But the bond pulsed, a torment that matched Naomi's own, binding them in a shared agony neither could name. The dungeon's darkness held her, but it was his heart that felt like the true prison. Chapter 7. Lessons in the Night. The dungeon's iron door groaned open, spilling torchlight across the damp stone floor where I, Naomi, crouched, my body still trembling from the phantom pain that had clawed at my chest for hours. The air was thick with mold and despair, but a new scent cut through. Cedar smoke, crisp frost, and a wild, untamed edge. Roarke. The Alpha Heir stood in the doorway, his silhouette a dark promise against the flickering light.
His amber eyes glinted under the moonlight streaming through a high barred window, sharp and unreadable, yet carrying that same haunted weight I glimpsed in the great hall. My heart lurched, the mysterious pull from the cursed throne flaring to life, a thread that tightened painfully in his presence. I hated him. His power, his scars, the stories of his blood-soaked past, but my body betrayed me, leaning toward him like a moth to flame. "Get up," he commanded, his voice a low growl, steady but edged with something raw. I staggered to my feet, my threadbare dress clinging to my sweat-damped skin, my auburn hair a tangled mess. The guards had left me unchained, but the dungeon was cage enough. Roarke's gaze swept over me, not with pity, but with a calculating intensity that made my skin prickle. "You're no use to me, weak. If you're to survive, you learn to fight. Now." His words were a blade, cutting through my confusion. Fight. I was an Omega, trained to serve, not to strike. But the set of his jaw brooked no argument. He led me out past the keep's shadowed corridors to a secluded courtyard bathed in moonlight. The night air was sharp, biting at my exposed arms, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. The courtyard was a circle of packed earth, ringed by gnarled oaks, their branches clawing at the starry sky. Roarke tossed a wooden staff at my feet, its surface worn smooth by countless hands. "Pick it up," he ordered, gripping an identical staff, his movements fluid, predatory. I fumbled with the weapon, its weight unfamiliar, my hands shaking from exhaustion and the lingering ache in my chest. "I don't know how," I whispered, my voice barely audible.
"You will," he said, stepping closer. His presence was overwhelming, his scent wrapping around me, stirring that cursed pull. He lunged, his staff a blur, and I stumbled back, barely raising mine to block. The impact jarred my arms, a shock of pain that woke something fierce in me. "Again," he growled, circling like a wolf. His strikes were relentless, precise, forcing me to move, to react. Each block sent vibrations through my bones, but his voice was a steady anchor, harsh, unyielding, but pushing me to survive. Feet apart, eyes on me, don't think, move. Then it happened. His staff caught mine, locking us in place, and his hand brushed my wrist to adjust my grip. The touch was electric, a jolt that seared through my skin, igniting the thread in my chest. I gasped, my eyes snapping to his. His amber gaze widened, a flicker of shock breaking his stoic mask. He felt it too. The spark, the undeniable chemistry that crackled between us like a storm. His fingers lingered a moment too long, warm and calloused, before he pulled back, his jaw tightening. "Focus," he snapped, but his voice was rougher, strained. The moonlight cast shadows across his scarred face, highlighting the torment he tried to hide. We sparred on, the night blurring into a rhythm of strikes and blocks. Each accidental brush, his hand on my shoulder, my arm grazing his, sent sparks racing through me, the bond pulsing stronger with every contact. I hated it, hated him, yet I couldn't deny the heat building in my core, the way my body leaned into his orbit. He was a storm, and I was caught in it, my fear mingling with a reckless need I didn't understand. "You're holding back," he said, his staff pinning mine to the ground, his face inches from mine. His breath was warm, his scent intoxicating, and that pull threatened to unravel me. "Why are you doing this?" I blurted, my voice trembling but defiant. "Why train me? Why save me?" His eyes darkened, the scar above his brow stark in the moonlight. For a moment, he was silent, the weight of his past, Ilara, the mate he'd lost, hanging between us. "Because the throne chose you," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "And I need to know why." The words were a confession, a crack in his armor, and the chemistry between us flared brighter, a dangerous flame that promised to consume us both.
Chapter 8. The Rival's Offer. The moonlight bathed the crimson claw-packed courtyard in a silver glow, casting long shadows from the gnarled oaks that ringed the packed earth. My breath came in sharp gasps, my arms burning from the weight of the wooden staff as I parried Roarke's relentless strikes. The Alpha Heir moved like a predator, his amber eyes locked on me, his scarred face a mask of focus, tinged with something deeper, something that made the invisible thread in my chest pulse with electric heat. Each clash of our staffs sent vibrations through my bones, but his occasional touch, fingers brushing my wrist, his hand steadying my stance, set my skin ablaze, a chemistry I couldn't deny. I, Naomi, the Omega prisoner, was caught in his orbit, hating him yet drawn to him, the bond from the cursed throne, a torment I couldn't escape.
The night air was crisp, laced with pine and the faint metallic tang of my own sweat. Roarke circled me, his cedar smoke scent wrapping around me, urging me to move faster, strike harder. "Keep your guard up," he growled, his voice low and rough, a command that anchored me despite my exhaustion. I swung my staff, aiming for his shoulder, but he deflected it effortlessly, his lips twitching with the ghost of a smirk. For a moment, I thought I saw approval in his gaze, but before I could dwell on it, a new presence shattered the rhythm of our training. A figure emerged from the shadows, his silhouette broad and imposing, his scent sharp with iron and clove. A rival Alpha. Torin, leader of the Iron Fang pack, strode into the courtyard with a swagger that screamed confidence and cunning. His dark hair gleamed under the moonlight, his green eyes glinting with a predatory amusement that made my stomach twist. The air shifted, the tension spiking, as Roarke stilled, his staff lowering, his body coiling like a spring. Torin's gaze swept over me, lingering too long, his smile a blade cloaked in charm. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice smooth as polished stone. "The Omega who survived the cursed throne. Quite the spectacle." Roarke stepped closer to me, his shoulder brushing mine, the contact sending a jolt through my body. His scent intensified, a possessive edge to it that made my heart race. "What do you want, Torin?" he said, his tone cold, a warning wrapped in steel. Torin's smile widened, undeterred, his eyes flicking to me. "I heard about your little prisoner, Roarke, an Omega who defies death. She's wasted in your dungeons." He took a step forward, his voice dropping to a silken purr. "Give her to me. I'll make better use of her. Mate, servant, whatever she's worth. My pet could use a curiosity like her." The words hit like a slap, but it was Roarke's reaction that stole my breath. His eyes blazed, a feral glow igniting in their amber depths, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, primal and dangerous. "She's not yours to claim," he snarled, the words dripping with a possessiveness that sent shivers down my spine. His hand shot out, gripping my arm, not roughly, but firmly, pulling me slightly behind him. The touch was electric, the bond flaring hot and fierce, and I hated how it grounded me, how it made me feel safe despite everything. His protective instinct was subtle but undeniable, a shield against Torin's gleaming ambition. Torin raised his hands, mock surrender, but his eyes glinted with calculation. "Easy, Prince. I'm offering a trade, not a fight. Your father's not pleased with this arrangement." He gestured to me. "Give her to me, and I'll smooth things over with the king. Keep the peace." The courtyard seemed to shrink, the moonlight colder, as the weight of his words settled. Roarke's grip tightened, his fingers warm against my skin, and I felt the storm in him. Fury, restraint, and something deeper, a torment tied to the bond we shared. "She stays with me," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise. He stepped forward, closing the distance between him and Torin, his posture radiating dominance. "Leave, now." Torin's smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed, assessing. "Very well," he said, stepping back, his tone light, but laced with menace. But this isn't over, Roarke. She's too valuable to be your pet forever. He turned, vanishing into the shadows, leaving a chill in his wake. Roarke's hand lingered on my arm, his touch a lingering spark. He didn't look at me, but I felt the weight of his gaze, the unspoken promise in his silence. The bond pulsed, a dangerous thread tying us tighter, and I wondered what price we'd both pay for his defiance. Chapter 9. Council of Judgment. The council chamber of the Crimson Claw Pack was a cavern of stone and shadow, its air heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and the acrid bite of old power. I, Naomi, stood shackled at the center, my wrists chafed by iron manacles, my threadbare dress a stark contrast to the rich furs and polished armor of the pack's elite. The chamber's high ceiling loomed above, carved with runes that seemed to pulse in the flickering light, echoing the cursed throne that had spared me. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, as the council's eyes bore into me, some curious, some hostile, all judging. The invisible thread in my chest, that maddening bond to Roarke, tugged painfully, a reminder of the man who'd brought me here, not as a free Omega, but as his prisoner. The council table was a crescent of dark oak, flanked by elders, betas, and high-born wolves. At its head sat the Alpha King, his grizzled face a mask of barely contained rage, his dark eyes glinting with the promise of violence. The Luna sat beside him, her smile sharp as a blade, her gaze slicing through me. Roarke stood forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "The throne spared her," he said, his tone steady but laced with a quiet ferocity. "That is no mockery. It is a sign. The ancient texts speak of the true mate, one chosen by the curse itself. Naomi survived its touch. That cannot be ignored." His words sent a shockwave through the chamber, the elders exchanging wary glances. An old wolf, his beard white as snow, leaned forward, his raspy voice, "The texts are clear. Only the Alpha's true mate can sit and live. But an Omega, it's unheard of." Torrhen's laugh was a low, mocking rumble. "A convenient interpretation, Prince," he said, rising with a lazy grace. "Or perhaps a desperate one. You defy your father for a servant, risking war with your own pack. For what? A bond you can't prove?" His green eyes flicked to me, sharp and possessive, sowing seeds of doubt. "She's a curiosity, nothing more. Let me take her, and I'll ensure peace between our packs. Your father's rule need not falter over this distraction." His words were silk over steel, stirring whispers of agreement among the council's more ambitious members. Roarke's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with a possessive fury that made my chest ache, the bond flaring hot and fierce. "She is not yours to claim," he growled, his voice a low thunder that silenced the room. "The throne's judgment is sacred. To ignore it is to defy the pack's oldest laws." He turned to the council, his gaze sweeping over them. "The runes spoke when she sat unharmed. Deny that and you deny our history." His words were a challenge, invoking ancient signs that even the king couldn't dismiss lightly. The elders murmured, torn between tradition and their ruler's wrath. The Alpha King's face darkened, his fist clenching. "You test me, boy. This Omega is a threat, a stain." But Roarke didn't flinch, his stance unyielding, his presence a shield between me and the king's rage. Torrhen's smile widened, sensing the rift he'd widened. "Think carefully, Roarke," he said, his tone dripping with menace. "You're not just fighting for her, you're fighting for your place." The chamber buzzed with tension,
the council divided, the air crackling with the threat of violence. I stood frozen, the bond pulsing in my chest, tying me to Roarke's defiance. His protection was a lifeline, but Torrens' words were a poison, planting doubts that threatened to unravel everything. The council's judgment hung in the balance, and I feared what price Roarke's stand would demand. Chapter 10. Bond Ignited. The moonlight drenched the Crimson Claw Pack's courtyard, transforming the packed earth into a silver arena where shadows danced with menace. My breath came in ragged bursts, my arms trembling under the weight of the wooden staff as I faced Roarke, the Alpha Heir, in another grueling training session. His amber eyes burned through the darkness, fierce and unyielding, the scar above his brow stark against his moonlit skin. The air was sharp with pine and the musky tang of our sweat, but his scent, cedar smoke, frost, and a wild, primal edge wrapped around me, tightening the invisible thread in my chest that had haunted me since I touched the cursed throne. I, Naomi, the Omega prisoner, stood defiant yet vulnerable, caught in the storm of his presence, hating the pull that drew me to him. Roarke moved like a predator, his staff a blur as he struck, forcing me to parry or be bruised. He growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my bones. My muscles screamed, but I swung back, my staff grazing his arm, a small victory that earned a flicker of approval in his gaze. The training was harsher tonight, driven by the council's judgment and Torrens' poisonous words.
Roarke's intensity was a blade, honed by the threat of losing me to his rival or his father's wrath. Each clash of our staffs sent sparks of pain through my arms, but it was the accidental brushes, his hand correcting my grip, his shoulder grazing mine, that ignited something deeper, a heat that pulsed with the bond I couldn't deny. He lunged, pinning my staff to the ground, his body inches from mine. The world narrowed to the heat of his breath, the wild glow in his eyes. "You're not trying hard enough," he said, his voice rough, almost a snarl. But his gaze betrayed him, flickering with a hunger that wasn't just for combat. My heart raced, the thread in my chest flaring hot, urging me closer despite my fear. I shoved back, breaking his hold, but he grabbed my wrist, pulling me against him. The contact was electric, a jolt that seared through my skin, and I gasped, my eyes locking with his. Time slowed, the moonlight casting his scarred face in sharp relief, and I saw it, the moment he nearly claimed me. His lips parted, a low growl rumbling in his throat, his grip tightening as if he could mark me as his right there. Then it happened. A burning sensation erupted on my collarbone, sharp and searing, like a brand kissed by starlight. I cried out, stumbling back, my hand flying to the spot. Roarke froze, his eyes widening, the hunger replaced by shock. I tore at the neckline of my threadbare dress, exposing a mark, a crescent moon, glowing faintly silver etched into my skin. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath, the oak's shadows stilling as if the night itself recognized the sign. "The divine moon mark," Roarke whispered, his voice raw with awe and dread. The elders' tales flooded my mind, the mark of the true mate, a sacred bond blessed by the moon goddess, undeniable and rare. Our connection, sparked by the throne, was no longer a question. It was divine, confirmed in shimmering silver. The bond pulsed, a living flame in my chest, tying me to Roarke with the force that stole my breath. His eyes met mine, and I saw the torment there, memories of Ilara, his lost love, warring with the reality of me. "This changes everything," he said, his voice barely audible, laced with a fear I didn't understand. The mark was a beacon, a blessing, but also a curse. It painted a target on me,
escalating the dangers from the Alpha King's wrath and Tauren's cunning ambition. The pack would see it as a challenge to their laws, a threat to their order. Roarke stepped back, his jaw tight, his hands clenching as if to restrain himself. "We can't stay here," he said, his tone urgent. "The mark. They'll come for you." His protective instinct surged, a shield against the storm brewing beyond the courtyard. But the bond burned brighter, a dangerous fire that promised to consume us both. I hated him, hated this, yet my body leaned toward him, the mark a silent vow I hadn't chosen. The moonlight bathed us, the mark glowing like a warning, and I knew the dangers had only begun. Chapter 11. Whispers of the Past. The Crimson Claw Pack's courtyard was a silver-lit battleground, the moonlight casting stark shadows across the packed earth where I, Naomi, stood trembling, my wooden staff heavy in my hands.
The divine moon mark on my collarbone burned beneath my threadbare dress, its faint silver glow a silent testament to the sacred bond tying me to Roarke, the Alpha Heir. His amber eyes, fierce and tormented, locked on me as we paused our training, the air thick with pine, sweat, and his cedar smoke scent. The bond pulsed in my chest, a living flame that both grounded and terrified me. I hated him, his scars, his power, the whispers of his lost love, Alara, but the mark and the throne's mercy had bound us, and I couldn't escape the pull that drew me to him. Before Roarke could speak, a shadow moved at the courtyard's edge, and Tauren, the Iron Fang Alpha, stepped into the moonlight. His dark hair gleamed, his green eyes glinting with a cunning that made my skin crawl. His scent, iron and clove, sharp and invasive, cut through the night, a stark contrast to Roarke's wild warmth. He clapped slowly, mockingly, his smile a blade. "Impressive," he drawled, his gaze sliding over me, lingering on the spot where my dress hid the moon mark. "The Omega grows fierce under your tutelage, Roarke, but she's not yours to keep." Roarke's body tensed, his staff lowering, a low growl rumbling in his throat. He growled, "Leave, Tauren," his voice a lethal edge, his hand twitching as if ready to strike. The bond flared, hot and possessive, urging me closer to him despite my fear. Tauren's smile widened, undeterred, and he stepped closer, his boots silent on the earth. "Not so fast, Prince," he said, his tones silken with menace. "I have a claim to her, one that predates your little infatuation." My heart stuttered, the words a cold shock. Claim? I was an Omega, a nobody, my past a blur of servitude and survival. What was he talking about? Tauren's eyes locked on mine, sharp and predatory. "Naomi," he said, my name a weapon on his lips. "Did you think your life began in these kitchens? Years ago, before you were cast into this pack's shadows, you were promised to me, a betrothal, sealed by your family's blood." His words hit like a blow, planting doubts that coiled in my mind like poison. I had no memories of a family, no past beyond the Crimson Claw's cruelty. Was he lying, or was there a truth buried in the fog of my childhood? The bond with Roarke pulsed, but now it wavered, tangled with confusion. Roarke's growl turned feral, his staff clattering to the ground as he lunged, seizing Tauren by the throat and slamming him against an oak. "Lies," he roared, his amber eyes blazing with the fury that shook the air. Tauren laughed, a choked sound, his hands gripping Roarke's wrists but not fighting back. "Ask her," he rasped, his gaze flicking to me. "Ask why her scent calls to me too. She was mine first." Roarke's grip tightened, his knuckles white, but his eyes darted to me, a flicker of doubt breaking his fury. The bond screamed, a searing pain that mirrored his torment, and I staggered, clutching my chest. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice cracking but defiant, surprising even myself. Both alphas froze, their gazes snapping to me. "I don't know you, Torin. I don't remember any betrothal. If it's true, prove it." My demand hung in the air, a challenge that made Torin's smile falter, his eyes narrowing with calculation.
Roarke released him, stepping back, but his body remained coiled, ready to strike. The bond pulsed, anchoring me to him, but Torin's claim gnawed at me, a shadow of a past I couldn't grasp. Torin straightened, rushing off his tunic, his smile returning like a mask. "In time, Naomi," he said, his voice soft but venomous. "The truth will surface, and you'll see where you belong." He turned, vanishing into the shadows, leaving a chill in his wake. Roarke's eyes met mine, haunted and fierce, the bond a live wire between us. His fury hadn't faded, but beneath it was a protective instinct, a silent vow to shield me. Yet Torin's words lingered, planting doubts that threatened to unravel our connection. The moonlight bathed us, the mark on my skin glowing faintly, and I feared the past was a danger as great as the present. Chapter 12. The Prophecy Unveiled. The Crimson Claw Pack's archive chamber was a labyrinth of dust and secrets, its air thick with the musty scent of ancient parchment and the faint tang of melted wax. I, Naomi, stood at the center, my wrists no longer shackled, but my body still trembling from the weight of Torin's claim and Roarke's feral reaction. The divine moon mark on my collarbone pulsed beneath my threadbare dress, its silver glow a faint warmth against my skin, a constant reminder of the bond tying me to Roarke, the Alpha Heir. His presence loomed beside me, his cedar smoke scent mingling with the chamber's stale air, his amber eyes scanning the shadows as if expecting an ambush. The bond in my chest thrummed, a painful lifeline that both anchored and terrified me, especially after Torin's words had sown doubts about my past. Elder Soren, a stooped figure with a beard like frost and eyes clouded with age, stood before a towering shelf of scrolls, his gnarled hands clutching a tome bound in cracked leather. The chamber's lone torch cast flickering shadows across the rune-carved walls, making the air feel alive with whispers of the past. Soren had summoned us here in secret, away from the Council's prying eyes and the Alpha King's wrath. "The throne and the mark," he rasped, his voice a gravelly echo in the stillness. "They are bound to a prophecy older than this pack, older than the blood that runs through it." His words sent a chill down my spine, the bond flaring as if it recognized the truth he was about to unveil. Roarke's jaw tightened, his scarred face a mask of guarded intensity. "Speak plainly, Elder," he said, his voice low but edged with impatience. "What does this mean for her?" He gestured to me, his hand brushing my arm, the contact sending a jolt of electricity through me. I stiffened, hating how my body leaned into his touch, how the mark burned brighter in his presence. Soren's eyes flicked to me, sharp despite their cloudiness, as if seeing through my omega facade to something deeper. "He is no mere servant," he said, opening the tome to a page etched with swirling runes. "The prophecy speaks of one marked by the moon, chosen by the cursed throne. She will either save the pack or destroy it." My breath caught, the words a weight that crushed the air from my lungs. Savior or destroyer, the idea was absurd. I was Naomi, the Omega who scrubbed pots, who dodged insults, who had no past beyond servitude. Yet the moon mark glowed, and the throne's warmth lingered in my memory. undeniable proof that I was more than I seemed. Soren's finger traced the runes, his voice trembling with reverence. When the true mate sits unharmed, the moon's blessing awakens. She will wield power to unite the packs or shatter them in chaos. The choice rests with her heart. His gaze met mine, heavy with expectation, and I felt the room spin, the bond pulsing with a fierce urgency. Roarke's hand tightened on my arm, protective yet possessive, his eyes blazing with a mix of fear and determination. "She's no destroyer," he growled, his voice a vow that challenged the prophecy itself. But doubt flickered in his gaze, a shadow of his past, of Ilara, the mate he'd lost. Torrhen's claim of a betrothal gnawed at me, a poison that made the prophecy's weight unbearable. What if my past held truths that could unravel everything? The bond tied me to Roarke, but what if it was a mistake, a curse disguised as a blessing? Soren closed the tome, the sound a dull thud in the silence. He said, "The mark confirms her role, but the path is fraught. The Alpha King will see her as a threat, and the Iron Fang Alpha will exploit her for his own ends." The mention of Torrhen sent a shiver through me, his cunning smile flashing in my mind. The stakes had risen. My life was no longer just about survival, but about a destiny that could reshake the pack. The council's division, the king's rage, and Torrhen's ambition loomed like storm clouds, and I was at their center. Roarke's gaze met mine, the bond a live wire between us, its heat both a comfort and a warning. "We'll face this together," he said, his voice soft but resolute, a promise that stirred the mark on my skin. But the prophecy's words echoed, savior or destroyer, and I feared what my choice would mean for him, for the pack, for the bond that held us captive. The changer's shadow seemed to close in, and I knew the dangers were only beginning to unfold. Chapter 13: Betrayal and Rejection. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a crucible of fire and fury, its air thick with the acrid scent of burning torches and the metallic tang of impending violence. I, Naomi, stood at the center, my wrists bound by coarse rope, my threadbare dress barely shielding me from the chill that seeped from the stone floor. The divine moon mark on my collarbone pulsed beneath my skin, a silver glow that felt like a brand, tying me to Roarke, the Alpha Heir, through a bond I couldn't escape. His cedar smoke scent lingered in my memory, but now it was drowned by the oppressive weight of the pack's spares, nobles, warriors, and elders, their eyes glinting with suspicion and scorn. The prophecy unveiled by Elder Soren had spread like wildfire, painting me as savior or destroyer, and the hall buzzed with whispers of my fate. The Alpha King loomed at the head of the hall, his grizzled face twisted with rage, his dark eyes boring into me like daggers. "This Omega is a threat," he roared, his fist slamming the oak table, sending goblets clattering. "This mark, her survival on the throne, it's a curse, a danger to our pack. She dies tonight." The words were a death sentence, final and unyielding, and the pack's murmurs swelled, a chorus of agreement that crushed my chest.
My heart pounded, the bond with Roarke flaring painfully, a desperate thread urging me to seek him out. He stood to the side, his scarred face a mask of stoic control, but his amber eyes were a storm, flickering with torment I couldn't read. "Roarke," the king barked, his voice a whip. "You claimed her as your prisoner. End this now, or you forfeit your place as heir." The ultimatum hung in the air, a blade poised to sever everything. My breath hitched.
the bond pulsing with a frantic heat as I waited for Roarke to speak, to fight for me as he had before. He'd defied his father, invoked ancient signs, trained me under the moonlight. Surely he wouldn't let me die. But his silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, and doubt clawed at my heart. He stepped forward, his boots echoing on the stone, his presence a storm of cedar and frost that made my skin prickle. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment I saw it. Pain, raw and deep, a mirror of the agony I'd felt in the dungeon. Then his expression hardened, his jaw tightening, and he spoke, his voice cold as winter. "She is nothing to me," he said, each word a dagger to my chest. "An omega, a mistake. I reject any bond with her. Let the king's will be done." The hall gasped, a collective shock rippling through the crowd, but the king's smile was a cruel slash of triumph. My bond shattered, a searing pain that tore through my core like wildfire. I staggered, a choked cry escaping my lips, my hands clutching my chest where the moonmark burned, its glow dimming as if mourning the betrayal. It wasn't just rejection, it was a severing, a ripping apart of the thread that had tied us since the throne's mercy. My vision blurred with tears, my body trembling as profound agony consumed me, worse than the dungeon's torment. I hated him, yet the bond had been my anchor, and now I was adrift, drowning in a sea of pain and betrayal. Roarke didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the floor, but his hands clenched at his sides, knuckles white, a silent betrayal of his own torment. The king nodded, satisfied, and signaled the guards. "Take her to the execution yard," he commanded. Rough hands seized my arms, dragging me toward the hall's doors, but I barely felt them. The pain in my chest was all-consuming, a void where Roarke's presence had been. The pack's murmurs followed me, some pitying, some gleeful, but it was Torrin's voice that cut through, smooth and venomous from the shadows. "A pity, Prince. You've thrown away a prize." As the guards pulled me into the cold night, the moon above seemed to mock me, its light no longer a blessing, but a cruel reminder of the mark and the bond now broken. Roarke's rejection had saved me from his father's immediate wrath, a calculated act to protect me, but it had shattered my soul. The agony was a weight I couldn't bear, and as the execution yard loomed, I wondered if death would be a mercy compared to this emptiness. Chapter 14. Awakening Resolve. The Crimson Claw Pack's isolation cell was a stone womb, cold and suffocating, its air heavy with the damp scent of mold and the faint metallic tang of my own dried blood. I, Naomi, curled on a straw pallet, my body aching from the guard's rough handling and the deeper wound of Roarke's rejection.
The divine moonmark on my collarbone pulsed faintly, its silver glow dimmed, a ghost of the bond that had once burned bright between me and the Alpha Heir. His words, "She is nothing to me," echoed in my mind, each syllable a shard in my chest, slicing deeper than any blade. The bond was shattered, leaving a void that gnawed at my soul, a profound agony that made every breath a struggle. Yet, in the silence of this cell, something stirred, a spark of defiance, a refusal to let his betrayal define me. The cell was bare, save for a cracked clay pitcher and a rusted chain bolted to the wall. Moonlight slipped through a narrow slit high above, casting a pale beam across the floor. My fingers traced the moonmark, its warmth a faint comfort against the chill. I was alone, spared from the execution yard by Roarke's calculated rejection, but the cost was a hollowness I couldn't shake. Torrin's claim of a betrothal, the prophecy naming me savior or destroyer, the throne's mercy, all swirled in my mind.
fragments of a puzzle I didn't understand. Who was I, really? Not just an omega, not just a servant. The mark and the throne had proven that, but my past was a fog, and I needed answers. I forced myself to my feet, my legs trembling, and searched the cell for anything to anchor me. My fingers brushed the straw, finding something hard beneath. A small, carved stone, no bigger than a coin, etched with a crescent moon and a rune I didn't recognize. My breath caught. It was no accident, no mere trinket. It felt warm, like the throne, and the mark on my skin flared in response. A silent confirmation. Was this a clue to my heritage, hidden by someone who knew I'd end up here? My mind raced, piecing together fragments. Torrens' claim, the prophecy, the mark. My family, if they had existed, had ties to this pack, to the iron thing, to secrets buried deep. I clutched the stone, a fire kindling in my chest. I would find the truth, no matter the cost. Outside, beyond my sight, Roarke watched from the shadows of the keep's outer walls. His amber eyes, haunted by memories of Alara and the pain of his rejection, tracked the guards' movements, ensuring they didn't touch me again. His cedar smoke scent lingered in the night air, a silent vow to protect me, even if I'd never know it. The bond, though shattered, still tugged at him, a faint echo of what it had been. He'd rejected me to save me, to buy time against his father's kill order, but the act had torn him apart. Every step away from the cell deepened his torment, the weight of his past and his duty to the pack warring with the pull to me. He stood vigil, a hidden guardian, his fists clenched against the stone, knowing the danger was far from over. In the cell, I paced, the stone gripped tightly in my hand. The agony of Roarke's betrayal hadn't faded, but it fueled me now, a fire that burned alongside my resolve. I was no longer the invisible omega, content to shrink from the world. The prophecy had named me savior or destroyer, and I'd be neither until I knew who I was. Torrens' betrothal claim, the moon mark, the throne, they were threads in a tapestry I'd unravel. "I'll find the truth," I whispered, my voice steady despite the pain. The vow was a lifeline, a promise to myself that I'd fight, not for Roarke, not for the pack, but for the girl I'd been before servitude stole her.
The moonlight shifted, casting the rune's shadow across the wall, and I felt a surge of purpose. Roarke might watch from afar, his protection a secret I couldn't feel, but I didn't need him. The mark, the stone, the prophecy, they were mine to claim. The Alpha King's wrath, Torrens' schemes, the pack's scorn, they'd face a Naomi who refused to break. The cell was a cage, but it was also a crucible, forging me into something new. The truth was out there, and I'd tear through the shadows to find it. Chapter 15. Ambush and Alliance. The night air outside the Crimson Claw Pack's keep was sharp with frost and pine, the moonlight casting jagged shadows across the rocky path leading to the outer woods. I, Naomi, slipped through the darkness, my breath misting in the cold, the carved stone from the isolation cell clutched tightly in my hand. Its crescent rune pulsed faintly, matching the divine moon mark on my collarbone, a reminder of the prophecy that named me savior or destroyer. The agony of Roarke's rejection lingered, a dull ache in my chest where our bond had shattered, but my resolve burned brighter. I'd escaped the cell, driven by my vow to uncover my heritage, when a sudden rustle in the trees froze me in place. My heart pounded, the bond's faint echo stirring, tugging me toward a danger I couldn't name. A muffled grunt broke the silence, followed by the clash of steel. I crept forward, my threadbare dress catching on thorns, and peered through the underbrush. Roarke stood in a clearing, his broad frame lit by moonlight, his sword flashing as he parried blows from 3 shadowed figures. Their cloaks bore the Iron Fang Pack sigil, and their blades gleamed with lethal intent, an assassination attempt. Roarke moved like a storm, his cedar smoke scent sharp with adrenaline, but blood stained his tunic, a gash on his arm slowing his strikes. The bond flared, a searing pull that drowned my fear with an urge to act. Without thinking, I grabbed a fallen branch, its weight solid in my hands, and charged into the fray. "Roarke!" I shouted, swinging at the nearest assassin. The wood cracked against his skull, sending him staggering. Roarke's amber eyes snapped at me, shock and fury mingling in their molten depths. "Naomi, get back," he growled. But I ignored him, dodging a blade that whistled past my ear. My training with him surged to life, feet apart, eyes sharp, and I struck again, buying him a moment to disarm another attacker. The third lunged at Roarke, but I threw myself between them, the branch splintering as it blocked a dagger aimed for his heart. Pain shot through my arm, blood welling, but the bond roared, anchoring me to him. Roarke dispatched the final assassin with a swift, brutal strike, his chest heaving as he turned to me. The clearing was silent. Save for our ragged breaths, the ground littered with bodies. His gaze locked on mine, the bond reigniting with a ferocity that stole my breath. "Why?" he demanded, his voice raw, stepping closer, his hand reaching for my bleeding arm. His touch was electric, sparking the moon mark into a silver blaze, and the shattered bond knit together, a warm pulse that filled the void in my chest. "You could have died," he said, his scarred face etched with torment, his cedar scent wrapping around me like a vow. "I couldn't let you die," I whispered, my voice trembling but fierce. "Not after everything." His eyes softened, the weight of his rejection, his sacrifice to save me, bare in their depths. "Naomi," he said, his voice breaking, "I rejected you to protect you. The king would have killed you. But the bond, it's real. You're my true mate." The confession was a spark, reigniting the bond with a heat that burned away my doubts. The moon mark glowed brighter, a silver seal on his words, and I felt the truth of it in my soul, despite the pain he'd caused. But the danger wasn't over. The Iron Fang assassins were a message. Tauren schemes, the king's wrath, the prophecies stakes were closing in. Roarke's grip tightened, protective and possessive. "We can't stay loyal to him," he said, his voice low, a fire kindling in his eyes. "My father's rule will destroy you, destroy us. We fight back together." His words sparked a rebellion, a defiance against the Alpha King that echoed my own resolve. The bond pulsed, a shared strength, and I nodded, the stone in my hand a reminder of the truth I'd seek. Footsteps echoed nearby, pack scouts drawn by the fight. Roarke pulled me into the shadows, his arm around me, the bond a lifeline in the dark. "We'll gather allies," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "The prophecy chose you, and I choose you." The words sealed our alliance, a rebellion born of blood and bond. As we fled into the night, the moon above bore witness, and I knew our fight against the king had just begun. Chapter 16. Shadows of Truth. The Crimson Claw Pack's archives were a crypt of secrets, buried deep beneath the keep, where the air hung heavy with the scent of ancient parchment and damp stone. I, Naomi, moved silently through the shadowed corridors. The carved stone from the isolation cell clutched in my hand, its crescent rune warm against my palm. The divine moon mark on my collarbone pulsed faintly, a silver glow that mirrored the bond reignited with Roarke, the Alpha Heir after the ambush in the woods. His cedar smoke scent enveloped me as he led the way, his broad frame a shield against the darkness, his amber eyes scanning for threats. The bond thrummed in my chest, a lifeline that both anchored
and unnerved me. Its heat reminder of his confession, "You're my true mate." But Torrens' claim of a betrothal and the prophecies' weight, savior or destroyer, drove me here, seeking answers about my hidden heritage. Roarke's torch cast flickering shadows across the rune-carved walls, the light dancing over shelves groaning with scrolls and tomes. "We don't have long," he whispered, his voice low, edged with urgency. The guards will notice we're gone. His hand brushed mine as he steadied me on the uneven stone floor, the contact sending a jolt through my skin, the moon mark flaring. I pulled away, my heart racing, still wary despite our alliance. His rejection had scarred me, even if it was to save me, and trust was a fragile thing. "The stone," I said, holding it up, its rune catching the light, "it's a key to my past. I need to know why the throne speared me." We reached a secluded alcove, where Elder Soren had directed us to a hidden cache of records. Roarke pried open a dusty chest, revealing brittle scrolls tied with faded leather. My fingers trembled as I unrolled one, its parchment crackling, revealing faded script and a crescent moon sigil matching my mark. The words were old, written in a tongue I barely understood, but Roarke's eyes narrowed as he read over my shoulder. "This speaks of the first alpha mate," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "A bloodline blessed by the moon goddess, tied to the throne's creation. Her descendants were lost. Until now." My breath caught as I traced a lineage chart, a name scrawled at its end, Naya. A name so close to mine it couldn't be coincidence. The document confirmed it. My bloodline traced back to the original alpha mate, explaining the throne's mercy and the moonmark's power. Torrens' betrothal claim wasn't a lie. It was a twisted truth, a pact made when I was a child, before my family vanished and I was cast into servitude. The revelation was a spark, igniting my resolve. I wasn't just an Omega, I was an heir to a legacy that could challenge the Alpha King's rule. I whispered, clutching the scroll, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. The bond with Roarke pulsed, his gaze fierce with pride and something deeper, a vow to stand by me. But our discovery wasn't unseen. A shadow shifted at the archive's entrance, and Torrens' scent, iron and clove sharp with menace, flooded the air. His green eyes glinted in the torchlight as he stepped forward, flanked by 2 Ironfang warriors. "Clever girl," he drawled, his smile a blade. "But you've just made yourself a bigger prize." Roarke stepped in front of me, his sword drawn, the bond flaring with protective fury. "You'll go through me first," he growled, his voice a lethal promise. Torrens' laugh was cold, his gaze flicking to the scroll in my hand. "That bloodline makes you a threat, Naomi, and threats don't last long." I gripped the scroll tighter, my resolve hardening. "I'm done hiding," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You want me? Come take me." Torrens' eyes narrowed, calculating, and he signaled his warriors to stand down, but his smile promised trouble. "This isn't over," he said, retreating into the shadows, his threat lingering like poison. Roarke's hand found mine, the bond a steady flame, and I knew we'd stirred a hornet's nest. The truth of my heritage was a weapon, but it had alerted Torren, who'd plot to intercept us. As we fled the archives, the scroll hidden against my chest, the moonlight above seemed to watch, and I braced for the battles ahead. Chapter 17. The Ironfang's Challenge. The Crimson Claw Pack's outer woods were a maze of shadow and frost, the moonlight filtering through gnarled pines to cast jagged patterns on the frozen earth. I, Naomi, clutched the ancient scroll against my chest, its brittle parchment a lifeline to my newly discovered heritage as a descendant of the first alpha mate. The divine moonmark on my collarbone glowed faintly beneath my threadbare dress, pulsing in time with the bond that tethered me to Roarke, the Alpha Heir. His cedar smoke scent surrounded me as we moved swiftly through the trees, his sword glinting in the dim light, his amber eyes scanning for danger. The archive's revelation had armed us with truth, but Torrens' threat loomed. his iron and clove scent a warning that followed us like a predator.
A twig snapped, and Werewolf halted, his hand gripping my arm, the contact sparking a jolt through the bond. Before I could speak, Torin emerged from the shadows, his dark hair slicked back, his green eyes gleaming with malicious intent. 4 Iron Fang warriors flanked him, their blades drawn, their postures tense. In his hand, he held a parchment, its edges deliberately aged, a cruel mockery of the scroll I carried. "Naomi," he purred, his voice smooth as venom. "You thought your little discovery would save you? This proves you were promised to me, a betrothal sealed by your lost family." He unfurled the parchment, revealing a forged sigil mimicking my moonmark, paired with his pack's crest. My heart stuttered, doubts clawing at my resolve. The scroll I'd found confirmed my lineage, but Torin's claims sowed confusion. Was my past truly tied to him? Roarke's growl was a low thunder, his sword raised, the bond flaring with possessive fury. "Lies," he snarled, stepping in front of me, his scarred face a mask of rage. "Your forgeries won't steal her." Torin's smile was a blade, his eyes flicking to me. "Ask her, Prince. Her blood knows the truth." The words stung, but my training with Werewolf surged to life, steadying my trembling hands. I wouldn't let Torin unravel me. "Prove it in combat," I said, my voice sharp despite the fear coiling in my gut. I drew the dagger Roarke had given me, its weight familiar from our moonlight sessions. Torin laughed, but his warriors stepped back, and he unsheathed a curved blade, its edge glinting. "A duel, then," he said, circling me. Roarke moved to intervene, but I shook my head, the bond urging me to prove myself. "This is mine," I whispered, and he nodded, his eyes blazing with trust and torment. Torin struck first, his blade a blur, but my training held. I dodged, my dagger parrying his strikes, the clash of steel ringing through the woods. My muscles burned, but I moved with precision Roarke had drilled into me, my feet light, my eyes sharp. I nicked Torin's arm, drawing blood, and his smile faltered, replaced by a snarl. Roarke's presence anchored me, the bond a steady flame, but Torin's taunts echoed, "You can't escape your past, Naomi." I faltered, and his blade grazed my shoulder, pain searing through me. Roarke roared, lunging, but I blocked Torin's next strike, driving him back. The duel ended as Torin's warriors surged forward, forcing us to retreat. Torin vanished into the trees, his voice echoing, "I'll rally my pack, Prince. She'll be mine." His forged parchment lay discarded, its lies exposed, but the doubt lingered, a poison in my mind. Roarke pulled me close, his hand on my wound, his touch reigniting the bond with a warmth that eased my pain. "You fought like a true mate," he said, his voice rough with pride, his amber eyes searching mine. The bond deepened, a shared strength that silenced my doubts for now, but Torin's escape promised more battles. We fled deeper into the woods, the scroll and my mark proof of my legitimacy, yet the forged betrothal gnawed at me. Roarke's arm around me was a vow, his scent a comfort, but the bond couldn't erase the questions about my past. Torin's threat loomed, his Iron Fang pack a growing shadow. As the moonlight faded, I gripped my dagger, the bond with Roarke a fire in my chest. The truth was closer, but so was the war Torin would bring.
Chapter 18, Gathering the Rebels. The hidden grove beyond the Crimson Clawpack's keep was cloaked in shadow, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, the moonlight barely piercing the dense canopy above. I, Naomi, stood beside Roarke, my dagger at my hip, the divine moon mark on my collarbone pulsing faintly beneath my patched cloak. The scroll detailing my heritage as a descendant of the first alpha mate was tucked fiefly against my chest, its truth a spark that fueled my resolve. The bond with Roarke, reignited after his confession, thrummed in my core. His cedar smoke scent a steady anchor as we faced a small circle of dissenters: Elder Soren, 2 grizzled betas named Call and Mara, and a handful of omegas who dared to dream of change. Torrens' escape and the Alpha King's tyranny had pushed us to this moment, a rebellion kindled in secret. Soren's frost-white beard caught the moonlight as he spoke, his voice a gravelly whisper. The prophecy names you, Naomi, savior or destroyer. Your mark proves your bloodline. The pack will follow you. His words stirred the group, their eyes glinting with hope and fear. I lifted my cloak, revealing the glowing crescent on my skin, and a murmur of awe rippled through them. Call, a beta with a scar across his cheek, nodded, his voice gruff. The king's rule has choked us too long. We're with you. Mara, her eyes sharp with defiance, agreed. But I saw hesitation in the Omegas, their lives shaped by servitude like mine. The bond with Roarke pulsed, urging me to lead, to prove I was more than the Omega I'd been. Roarke stepped forward, his scarred face fierce in the dim light. We strike at the next council meeting, he said, his voice low but commanding. We expose my father's corruption and rally the pack to Naomi's cause. His amber eyes met mine, the bond flaring with a warmth that steadied my trembling hands. I spoke, my voice stronger than I felt. No more fear. We fight for a pack where no one is less than another. The words ignited a fire in the group, their nods firming. But doubt gnawed at me. Torrens' threat loomed, and trust was a fragile thing. We planned in whispers, mapping the keep's weak points, but a rustle in the underbrush snapped us to attention. Roarke's sword was out in an instant, his body shielding mine, the bond sparking with protective fury. Before we could react, arrows rained from the trees, Iron Fang's signets glinting on their fletching. A traitor had leaked our plans, someone among us. Ambush! Roarke roared, deflecting an arrow with his blade. Call and Mara fought back, but the Omegas froze, panic seizing them. My training with Roarke surged to life, my dagger drawn as I scanned the chaos. The grove's narrow path was a trap, but a fallen log nearby offered cover. Move! I shouted, shoving an Omega toward the log. My voice cut through their fear, and they followed, scrambling for safety. I grabbed a torch from Sorn, hurling it into the dry brush to create a wall of flame, slowing the attackers. Roarke fought like a storm, his sword a blur, but blood seeped from a new wound on his side. The bond screamed, urging me to act. I darted to him, parrying a blade aimed at his back, my dagger steady from our moonlight sessions. Stay with me, I gasped, and his eyes flashed with pride, the bond a lifeline between us. The flames bought us time, and we retreated, the dissenters rallying behind me. The traitor's identity eluded us, but Mara's quick glance at an Omega, who avoided my gaze, planted suspicion. We reached a safe hollow, Roarke's hand on my shoulder, his touch reigniting the bond's warmth. You saved us, he said, his voice rough with admiration. The group's eyes turned to me, not as an Omega, but as a leader, their loyalty cemented by my actions. Soren nodded, his voice firm. The moon mark chose well. But the traitor's betrayal and Torrens' ambush heightened the stakes. The king would know of our rebellion soon. As we caught our breath, the bond with Roarke deepened, a shared strength that drowned my doubts. I was no longer just Naomi, the servant. I was a leader, my heritage and mark a call to action. The rebellion was fragile, but my resolve was iron. The Alpha King's throne loomed, and with Torrens' shadow closing in, I knew our fight was just beginning. Chapter 19. The King's Reckoning. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a cauldron of fire and fury, its air thick with the acrid scent of burning torches and the metallic tang of drawn blades. I, Naomi, stood at the heart of the rebellion, my dagger gripped tightly, the divine moonmark on my collarbone glowing silver beneath my patched cloak. The cursed throne loomed behind me, its ebony surface pulsing with an eerie warmth, as if it recognized my presence. Roarke stood beside me, his cedar smoke sent a steady anchor, his amber eyes blazing with resolve despite the blood seeping from his side, a wound from the ambush. The group's eyes turned to me, not as an Omega, but as a leader,
their loyalty cemented by my actions. Soren nodded, his voice firm. The moon mark chose well. But the traitor's betrayal and Torn's ambush heightened the stakes. The king would know of our rebellion soon. As we caught our breath, the bond with Roarke deepened, a shared strength that drowned my doubts. I was no longer just Naomi, the servant. I was a leader, my heritage and mark a call to action. The rebellion was fragile, but my resolve was iron. The Alpha King's throne loomed, and with Torn's shadow closing in, I knew our fight was just beginning.
Chapter 19. The King's Reckoning. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a cauldron of fire and fury, its air thick with the acrid scent of burning torches and the metallic tang of drawn blades. I, Naomi, stood at the heart of the rebellion, my dagger gripped tightly, the divine moonmark on my collarbone glowing silver beneath my patched cloak. The cursed throne loomed behind me, its ebony surface pulsing with an eerie warmth as if it recognized my presence. Roarke stood beside me, his cedar smoke scent a steady anchor, his amber eyes blazing with resolute, despite the blood seeping from his side, a wound from the ambush. Our rebel allies, Elder Soren, Betas Kale and Mara, and a handful of loyal Omegas flanked us, their faces set with defiance. The bond between Roarke and I thrummed, a lifeline in the storm, but the Alpha King's presence dominated, his grizzled frame radiating menace from the head of the hall. The king's dark eyes burned with rage, his fist clutching a ceremonial dagger as he rose from his seat. "Traitors! You dare challenge me with this Omega filth?" The Luna smile was a venomous slash, her gaze slicing into me. But the pack's nobles and warriors wavered, their eyes flicking to my moonmark, its glow a beacon of the prophecy. Roarke stepped forward, his sword raised, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Your rule is a lie, father," he said, his tone cold and unyielding. "You've hoarded power, crushed the weak, and hidden the truth of Naomi's bloodline. She's a descendant of the first Alpha mate, chosen by the throne. Your corruption ends tonight." The hall erupted in murmurs. The scroll from the archives clutched in Soren's hands as he hobbled forward. "Her heritage is true," he rasped, unrolling the parchment to reveal the crescent sigil matching my mark. "Naomi is of the moon's bloodline, with the right to challenge the throne." The confirmation sent a shockwave through the pack, some nobles nodding, others glaring with suspicion. My heart pounded, the bond with Roarke flaring as I faced the king, my voice steady despite the fear clawing my chest. "I'm no longer your servant," I said, stepping toward the throne. "The prophecy names me, and I claim my place." The king's roar was a beast unleashed, his dagger flashing as he charged. "You die now," and the hall exploded into chaos. Loyalist warriors surged forward, clashing with our rebels, steel ringing against steel. Roarke met his father's blade with his own, their duel a storm of fury, but the king's strength was brutal, his experience outweighing Roarke's youth. I fought beside Mara, my dagger parrying a guard's strike, my training with Roarke guiding my movements. The throne's warmth pulsed behind me, as if urging me on, its runes glowing in sync with my mark. A cry tore my focus. Roarke staggered, blood blooming across his chest as the king's dagger found its mark. "No!" I screamed, the bond searing with agony, a mirror of his pain. I lunged, knocking a guard aside to reach him, my dagger slashing at the king's arm. He snarled, turning on me, but Roarke rallied, tackling him to the ground. The hall froze, the rebels gaining ground, but the king's strength was relentless. He threw Roarke off, his blade raised for a killing blow, and time slowed. The bond screamed, the throne's energy surging through me, and I faced a critical choice: strike the king and risk becoming the destroyer, or find another way. I darted forward, not for the king, but for the throne, my hand grazing its surface. A pulse of power shot through me, the moon mark blazing, and I shouted, "Enough!" My voice, amplified by the throne's magic, echoed like thunder, halting the fight. The king froze, his eyes wide, as the pack turned to me, their weapons lowering. Roarke struggled to his feet, his gaze locked on mine, the bond a shared strength. I had to choose, kill the king and claim power through blood, or spare him and risk everything. The throne's warmth urged me to decide, and I knew the rebellion's fate and Roarke's life hung on my next move. Chapter 20. The Prophecies' Choice. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack was a battlefield of flickering torchlight and blood-streaked stone, the air thick with the acrid scent of sweat and steel. I, Naomi, stood before the cursed throne, its ebony surface pulsing with a warmth that matched the divine moonmark glowing silver on my collarbone. The Alpha King loomed, his dagger raised over Roarke, who knelt, blood streaming from his chest, his amber eyes locked on mine with a trust that made the bond between us blaze. Our rebels, Elder Soren, Betas Kale and Mara, and the Omegas held their ground, their blades steady, but the pack's nobles wavered, torn by the prophecy naming me savior or destroyer. The throne's power surged through me, its runes flaring in sync with my mark, urging me to choose, kill the king and risk chaos, or find another path. The bond with Roarke, a living flame in my chest, guided me. I couldn't become the destroyer. Lower your blade, I commanded, my voice amplified by the throne's magic, resonating like a storm. The king's eyes widened, his arm trembling as the throne's power pressed against him, an invisible force born of my mark. I said, stepping forward, the scroll of my heritage clutched in my hand. You've ruled through fear, but I choose unity. The hall held its breath as I touched the throne, its energy flowing through me, a silver light enveloping the king. He dropped to his knees, his dagger clattering, subdued not by death, but by the moon's will. Gasps rippled through the pack, the nobles lowering their weapons, awed by the display. Soren stepped forward, his voice steady. Her bloodline is true, her choice divine. The prophecy is fulfilled. She is our savior. The rebels cheered, their voices a tide of hope, and I declared, no more Omega servitude. The pack's laws will honor all. The Omega's eyes shone, their chains of fear breaking, and even the nobles nodded, swayed by the throne's judgment. Roarke struggled to his feet, his hand finding mine, the bond flaring with a warmth that sealed our partnership. You did it, he whispered, his cedar smoke scent grounding me, his touch reigniting the fire in my core. But the victory was interrupted. Torrhen's iron and clove scent flooded the hall as he burst through the doors, flanked by Iron Fang warriors, his green eyes blazing with desperation. You can't rewrite fate, he snarled, brandishing a forged decree claiming the throne through our supposed betrothal. His final scheme was a desperate grasp for power, but the pack's loyalty had shifted. Mara and Kale surged forward, disarming his warriors, while I faced Torrhen, my dagger drawn, the throne's power still humming in my veins. Your lies end here, I said, my voice unwavering. My heritage is proven. You have no claim. Torrhen lunged, but Roarke intercepted, his sword clashing with Torrhen's blade. Despite his wounds, Roarke fought with feral grace, the bond fueling his strength. I joined him, my dagger parrying Torrhen's strikes, our movements synchronized by the bond. The pack watched, their faith in me unyielding, and Torrhen faltered, his warriors subdued. Exile him, I declared, the authority of the throne in my voice. The rebels seized Torrhen, dragging him from the hall as he shouted curses, his threat extinguished. You'll regret this, he spat, but the pack's unity drowned his words. As the hall quieted, Roarke pulled me close, his bloodied hand cupping my face, the bond a steady flame that no longer scared me. I chose you, Naomi, his voice raw, his amber eyes free of doubt. I leaned into him, the moon mark glowing, our partnership sealed not just by fate, but by love. The pack knelt, acknowledging a new order, the throne no longer cursed, but a symbol of hope. The king, stripped of power, was confined, his reign ended without blood. My choice to unite had fulfilled the prophecy, abolishing servitude and forging a pack where all were equal. The torchlight softened, the air lighter, as the rebels embraced their freedom. Roarke's arm around me was a promise, the bond, a vow we'd face the future together. The scroll and mark were my truth, my heritage a bridge between past and present. As the dawn approached, I knew the pack's new era was just beginning, and I was ready to lead it. Chapter 21. Dawn of a New Pack. The great hall of the Crimson Claw Pack glowed with the soft light of dawn, its rays filtering through high windows to bathe the once cursed throne in a golden warmth. I, Naomi, stood beside it, my hand resting on its ebony surface, no longer a symbol of fear, but of unity. The divine moonmark on my collarbone shimmered faintly, a silver crescent that had guided me from Omega servant to leader. Roarke, the Alpha Heir, now my partner in every sense, stood at my side, his cedar smoke scent grounding me, his amber eyes reflecting a pride that made our bond pulse with quiet strength.
The hall was filled with the pack. Nobles, betas, omegas, all equal now, their faces alight with hope, a stark contrast to the blood and chaos of days past. The air carried the scent of fresh bread and blooming jasmine, a promise of renewal. The scroll of my heritage lay open on a table, its ancient script fully deciphered by Elder Soren. "You are Naia's heir," he had declared, his frost-white beard trembling with awe. "Descended from the pack's founders, the first alpha mate who forged the throne with the moon goddess's blessing." The revelation had settled over me like a mantle, tying me to the Crimson Claw's origins. My lost family, erased by time and betrayal, had been guardians of the throne's power, their bloodline hidden to protect it from those like the former Alpha King. Torrhen's false betrothal claim was a twisted echo of a pact my parents had rejected, choosing to shield me instead. The truth was my crown, and I wore it with a resolve forged in fire. Roarke addressed the pack, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a leader reborn. "The old laws are gone," he said, his scarred face softened by the dawn's light. "Naia's choice has freed us. Omegas, betas, all are equal under the moon." Cheers rose, a tide of voices from those once silenced, like Mara and Kale, who stood among us, their loyalty unwavering. The former king, confined to a distant tower, was a shadow of his former self, his tyranny undone by mercy. The throne, its curse lifted by my mark, now stood as a beacon of unity, its runes glowing with a gentle light that mirrored my own. I stepped forward, my heart steady despite the weight of leadership. "We build a pack where no one is less," I said, my voice clear, echoing in the hall. "Together, we'll honor our past and shape our future." The pack knelt, not in submission, but in respect, their trust a gift I'd never take for granted. Roarke's hand found mine, his touch sparking the bond, a warmth that sealed our partnership. "You've changed everything," he whispered, his eyes holding mine, free of the torment that once haunted them. The memory of Alara, his lost love, was a scar he'd carry, but our bond was a new beginning, a love forged in battle and choice. As the pack dispersed to rebuild, I stood with Roarke on the keep's balcony, the dawn painting the forest in hues of gold and crimson. The bond thrummed, a shared strength that felt like home. "What now?" I asked, the carved stone from the isolation cell in my pocket, a reminder of my journey. Roarke's smile was rare, a flicker of hope. "We lead, we grow, and we face whatever comes," he said. "There are whispers of other packs, restless under old laws. They'll look to us."
The hint of new adventures stirred my blood. Distant lands, new allies, challenges to our unity. The moon mark glowed, a promise of the goddess's guidance. The forest stretched before us, alive with possibility, and I leaned into Roarke, his arm around me a vow. My heritage was no longer a mystery, but a legacy to uphold. The pack was ours to guide, its future bright, but not without trials. As the sun rose, I saw a vision of us. Naia and Roarke, partners in love and leadership, ready for the adventures that awaited. The dawn was ours, and with the bond as our strength, we'd face the world together.